Good evening, cheeseheads around the world, wherever you are. It is a lovely evening in sunny UK today, and I'm joined this evening by the legend, the Tottenham YouTube sensation that is Matt Hayes. How's it going, Matt? You all right? You all good?
I'm all good. I don't think I can live up to that introduction, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. It's always a pleasure. It's always good to get different views, and I see the Enoch Anna banner behind you. Maybe we can get into that later if we have time.
Sure
Matt
we will.
was good enough to say, do you want me to take it down? And I'm like, no, freedom of speech is king here. Freedom of speech is king. Well, this was my notes the other day. Oh, here they are. Yep. And this is what happened, because it was about the appointment of Antonio Conte to Spurs as new head coach. Obviously, that completely fell apart. Matt, firstly, we haven't actually been on the air on the Cheese Room since then. I know you've possibly been doing your own thing over on your own channel. What's your take on all of this? Because it was nailed on, we thought, and then we've been nailed on with Poch, we've been nailed on with Conte. They've both fallen to pieces. It now looks like I'm going to have to step in and manage the team if it carries on much like this. What happened? How did it all fall apart? From your take.
Look, I think that's the big question we all want to find out. And I was live when that news broke on Friday night, and it was absolutely devastating. We'd heard from DiMarzio earlier on Friday afternoon that Conte was having doubts, and we were kind of having a little discussion on that. Then all of a sudden, you're starting to hear from Dan Kilpatrick that it's not happening. Then Alistair Gold was saying we're pulling out of talks. And look, it was a truly baffling situation for everyone. I think Alistair Gold summed it up perfectly on Friday night when he said, or was it Saturday? He said the day before, anyway, that barring a disaster, Conte would be the new manager of Spurs. And then 24 hours later, he's saying, "Did he know the disaster be Tottenham Hotspur?" And that is the situation we find ourselves in now. But look, we're hearing all these different reports about what the reason is, and who actually pulled out of discussions. From Conte's point of view, he wanted 7 backroom staff to be going with him, whereas Levy was only willing to give him 4. Salary was also a dispute with Conte, I think, wanting €3 million more than what Spurs were offering him. So you can see from his side of view and the lack of ambition that the board has. I think not one Spurs fan will deny that. And then you're looking at, from Tottenham's point of view, the financial issues we're having, and a big one was that Conte was not willing to work with the youth players of the club. I've heard players like Ryan Sessegnon and Oliver Skip were not going to get a look in. And from a Tottenham point of view, when you're looking at the kind of core philosophies of the club, that wasn't good for us. So I think it did start to peter out for both. But look, from what we're hearing today, it's not completely dead in the water just yet. But I'd be very, very surprised if this move was revived.
I mean, it would be a shock, wouldn't it? But equally, it's a shock that the move breaks down on, what are we talking about? We're talking about a couple of backroom members of staff and £3 million. I mean, £3 million in the scheme of a club that turns over nearly £1 billion. I mean, or £1 billion. What is valued at 2.3 billion? What on earth is £3 million in the scheme of things? Surely to God, I'm not sure I believe that, Matt, and I'm not sure I believe the claims about the backroom staff either. So I know what's coming through the sort of in the nose and the mediums and all the rest of it, but surely to God, we can't be letting it break down over that. And it's more about transfer budgets and where the club sees himself versus where Antonio Conte wants to see himself, isn't it?
Look, I would think on the point of transfer budget, why would you go into negotiations with Antonio Conte if transfer budget was going to be an issue? Because there's a handful of things when you're going into talks with a manager like him, and one of them is that he will need a massive transfer kitty to be able to build what he wants, especially when he's coming to a team like ours that is so depleted, that is that has all of the issues that it does have. I'm sure you've covered those enough on this channel. So I think Spurs would have known what was going on there if that learned. And in terms of the ambition, some of the lines coming out of Italy were that Conte didn't feel the Tottenham board would put pressure on him to win trophies. Yeah. And I mean, I think that tells you quite a bit. Look, I know we've differing opinions on this, but trophies don't seem to be the priority for Daniel Levy and Spurs. They seem to be content with getting into the Champions League and being happy with that. Now, of course, we're not there at the moment, but I think we could talk for hours and hours about what actually made the deal fall through, because there are so many possibilities, and at the end of the day, we're not going to know. And that is the most frustrating part, because we can speculate and we can do everything we want. We're not going to know, but whatever the reason is, it could have been a fantastic move for Spurs, and we've let it slip out of our grasp, and that is disappointing.
Yeah. One move that hasn't fallen through, though, Fabio is joining the club. Paratici joined allegedly today. It's all signed, sealed, and delivered. If you believe what you read, and I mean that in itself is a funny move, isn't it, Matt? Because that's going to bring in a load of extra cash expectations from him. Number one, because I can't imagine he's cheap. But I would also imagine he's got a list of targets. I mean, this is the guy who negotiated the Cristiano Ronaldo transfer, and I know he's chucked a few frees in the mix as well. But Aaron Ramsey on 400 grand a week is not the kind of transfer that Spurs like to do. Absolutely. So it's a bit of a strange one, really, isn't it? I mean, does he make sense to Spurs? And maybe he could push the Conte thing over the line. You never know. Maybe once his foot's in the door, because he's going to have a say in the manager, right? What's your thoughts on Paratici?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. There's definitely a lot of maybe questions that would need to be asked as to why this is happening. And look, we heard it was a good few weeks back that Fabio Paratici would be leaving Juventus, and I think it's very convenient that Spurs are all of a sudden in the mix. So I don't know, was there something kind of pre-agreed that he'd leave Juventus for Tottenham? Whatever the reason is, I do think there is an element of ambition there from Daniel Levy in trying to get him in and trying to get a bit more structure in the decisions that are going to be made within the football club, because Steve Hitchen, for as much as he tries, is working under very, very tight restrictions with the budget and all that. I think by bringing in someone like Paratici, Levy would have to give him the money he wants, and it would be very difficult for him to completely give the power to someone else in these footballing decisions and all that. So I don't think Paratici will have as much power as he did with Juventus, which will be a new challenge for him as well, of course. But I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And from what I understand, Paratici, one of his first things to do at Spurs will be to try and push this Conte deal over the line. And I had initially thought that Conte wanted Paratici to come with him, but it actually looks as though it's the other way around. And we'd initially approached Paratici to try and help him convince Pochettino to come to the club with the issues Pochettino was having with Leonardo at PSG.
Yeah.
And then went that as the next target for Spurs. So look, I'm happy to deal. Like you mentioned there, his free transfers, the likes of Andrea Pirlo, Paul Pogba, Fernando Llorente, Aaron Ramsey, Adrian Rabiot. There's a whole list of players there that he's managed to get in on a free. But with the wage budget, that could be a problem for Spurs. I don't think our wage budget is as kind of set in stone as it was in the past, because you're looking at Gareth Bale on about £220,000 a week from Spurs, and Kane and Son not too far behind him. I think we are a bit different to kind of the traditional Spurs wage restrictions, but it's a deal that has a bit of potential, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
No, I am too. Stuart Such has been dropping a comment in there. If you haven't already dropped a comment in, do drop a comment in. Let us know you're here and what your thoughts are. And do subscribe. Don't forget to hit the subscription button if you haven't already. I'm sure Fabio Paratici is a good director of football, but I can't help feel the players and the profile will be after. Well, I think Ragnick or Campos would be a better fit for Spurs. Matt, is that a concern? I mean, you've kind of touched on it briefly, but a lot of people are not very sold on Paratici in terms of, we know what he's done, but is this... Where does it fit in? Why is Levy? I mean, you say he's showing ambition, which is great because we all want him to show ambition, right, with Spurs. But where does it fit in? Because he just seems to be a little bit too big time for Spurs, dare I say it.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. We want to be that club that attracts the big names, whether they're players or managers or even to this level, director of football. So there will be that element of kind of trying to think of the word. It's not quite fear, but you have like some concerns and worries about it. And look, I think going for Jose Mourinho and actually getting him was the first time that we did go for that big name, and we all know how that turned out. And I'd be fearing with Paratici because, look, Levy may have said, okay, we'll give you the money and see where it goes. So I'd be concerned that if Paratici comes in and has his first window, maybe second window, and he has good financial backing, if things don't go exactly to plan there, that's when Levy will kind of start getting a bit kind of skeptical about the entire thing, and he may want to revert to his thinking, well, this isn't working out, maybe this isn't the direction to go for Spurs, maybe I should just go back to what I was doing with Steve Hitchen in charge. So look, there's definitely concerns in every decision Daniel Levy makes, every decision that Spurs make. And look, I'd say the same about every club. There is that potential for things to go awry, and when it's a big decision, a big risk like this, of course the concerns are heightened, but so are the hopes and the delusions that I'm certainly guilty of as a Spurs fan, that this could go absolutely perfectly. It's probably not going to go right on script as Daniel Levy wants it, but I'm quite excited about this. And again, I really want the director of football, was kind of in that role. He wasn't exactly in that role. And we need a man kind of the middle ground between the footballing side of things and the financial side of things. Because when the man who's controlling the purse strings is making those final decisions, it doesn't always work out very well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do understand that, and I understand why you say that. Conte. So for you, Matt, let's go back to Conte. Is he the right man for the job, or have we dodged a bullet if we don't get him after all?
Am I allowed to go with neither of those answers? I think Conte is a very, very, very good option. The fact that a manager of his caliber, of his ability, whose stocks are probably higher than they've ever been, the fact that the job is in any way attractive to him, I think just goes to show that maybe Spurs are in a better position than we all feel. And look, I'm looking at Conte's history. I'm looking at what he's achieved. I'm looking at who he's worked with. He's been a manager 7 years in top flight football. His debut season with Chelsea in the Premier League, he had a record amount of wins that season with 30. He levelled the record of most consecutive wins in a Premier League season. Going back to his time at Juventus, his first season there, or his second season, his first title, he did it without losing a single game. Then 2 years later, he got over 100 points. And then he's gone back to Italy this season with Inter Milan, and he's ended Juventus' 9-year reign that he himself started. So I think his CV speaks for itself. He is an absolutely incredible manager who deserves every bit of praise that is going towards him. But you need to look at the work, the environment that he's worked in. At Juventus, he was backed. It was Paratici. He was backed. His own squad was built. It was successful. He went to Chelsea, and we know how Roman Abramovich is. He gave him all the money he wanted. He was successful. Same in Inter Milan. There is, of course, the concerns as to whether or not that will happen at Spurs. But I really don't think you can look beyond the success he has on the football pitch, the way he plays, his versatility within a game, the kind of progressive three at the back. I think him playing defensive football is a myth. Inter Milan scored 89 goals in the Serie A this season, which is fewer than Bayern Munich and Atalanta only in the top 5 European leagues. So his team scores goals. Such a versatile manager. Whether he's playing target men up front or wide forwards in the midfield, he has such a fantastic sort of mix of players, and he plays the football that we want to play. Very progressive, very penetrative in between the lines and all that. If we want to go for a free-flowing, energetic, absolutely 100% attacking manager, he's not the man for us. But that isn't always what brings you success. That isn't what always gets you the results. You need that man who's more willing to play the way that he needs to play. He'll be pragmatic if he has to be. So for me, of the options that are there now, I think Antonio Conte is the best one. And look, Pochettino he's my footballing hero. He's the man who made me fall in love with Spurs. He's the man he was the one who made me so interested in football that I'd read books, I'd study tactics and all that. It was because of him and because of, I suppose, what I felt and what I experienced watching his Spurs team do. But right now, Conte is just a better option. And Pochettino, I think, will come back to Spurs someday. So we could just wait around for him, whereas Conte feels like a now or never sort of deal. And I think it's a risk that Spurs have to take.
I think you're absolutely right. I think Pochettino's last chapter with Spurs has not been written yet. And absolutely, he will be back at some stage. I think if I'm being really honest, a lot of people are getting very excited about the thought of Pochettino coming back, and it was probably a little bit too early. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd be happy to see Poch back. I called him a loser and various other things. I will admit that because he didn't win anything, so that by default makes you a loser. But you've got to say the way he developed the football club, run the football club over those years. Made everyone love Tottenham a little bit more, whether they're young like you are, Matt, and maybe not been following Spurs for as long as someone old like me, or some of our other people who got watching, who've seen it for a lot longer. But I think Pochettino is universally popular and will come back at some point. There's some good stuff here. Sweaty Cockerel. All we need is a manager that can command respect from players, tactically astute, and that plays attacking football. There must be hundreds out there. Well, I mean, that's kind of true, except the short list of people with silverware is very short indeed. Does Potter not float your boat, Matt? What are you saying about Mr. Potter?
I really respect Graham Potter, and I really respect the type of football he plays and the footballing philosophies that you can clearly see within his teams that he has. But he's just not at the level for Spurs. I don't think we as a fan base can demand success, and we can demand Champions League football, we can demand silverware, and then demand a manager who has never done any of that. And look, again, his CV speaks for itself. He's done some incredible work. He took over Östersunds in Sweden in the 4th division, and he brought them to the last 32 of the Europa League campaign. He did great work at Swansea as well. And what we're seeing at Brighton now is it's a crazy enigma of a team who play such good football and create so many chances, but still have a relegation battle against them. And yes, I will 100% agree with the argument that if Brighton had a better striker, they would be much higher up the table. But it's a massive difference between being Brighton, West Brom, even up as high as Aston Villa and Leeds. The one thing that we've noticed from Brighton this season is they haven't quite been able to compete with the top teams. Now, yeah, of course, their weakened squad is a big factor in that, but is Potter at that level where he can compete at the very top? Is he at the level where he can get us back into Champions League football? And one thing I've been saying with regards to the Conte links is, as much as you can say Conte is a fantastic manager and he can get us into the top 4, you can't judge our expectations and potential for the next season on us. You need to judge it on what's around us. And you're judging it against Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, and this Man United team that somehow keep winning games. Yeah. Is Potter the man who can make us compete on that level? I really don't think he is. He's fairly new to management, even newer to the Premier League level. Maybe 10, 15 years down the line, if he gets another job, maybe goes to Leeds or Villa and then kind of working up from there. Definitely he's a potential manager for Spurs in the future, but he's just not the right option now.
But surely everyone needs a chance. Everyone starts somewhere, and going on the sort of Conte bandwagon of he wins things. Jose Mourinho has got quite a good record of winning things, and he royally titsed us up, didn't he, for the last sort of 18 months? I mean, let's face it. Yes, we were top at Christmas. I was trying to be really optimistic, and maybe I was saying things I didn't really truly believe because we were playing dog awful football all the way through and never dominating teams, were we really? It was like get a goal and then stick 11 players behind the ball. Obviously, Conte is not subscribed to that sort of mentality of management in the same way that Jose is, but the fact remains they're both proven winners, and Spurs don't necessarily have the squad strength that some of these other teams have that these guys have managed. Maybe we need to look to someone a little bit like Potter, or a little bit like Ten Hag, who has now moved into, I understand that the favourite position, the favourite slot at the moment. I think he's 3-1 with the bookies. Maybe we need, and that's I suppose my point. Back to my original question about was Conte the right man for the job or not? He's sort of maybe we've dodged a bullet because he's not the right fit for Spurs.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a potential truth of it all. It's similar to Paratici. There are the risks with all of that. On the point of Potter needing a chance, he absolutely does. But we don't want to be that club who gives him a chance. We want to be the club who bring in the managers who have had their chance and who have proven they are able to do that. And the one key difference is Mourinho was on the way down and he had a reputation to save, whereas Conte is at the peak and he has a reputation to uphold. So for Jose Mourinho to take that job, if he had been successful, it would have been incredible. If he had won us a league or a Champions League, it would have been probably the height of his career since what he achieved at Porto in terms of the stature of an accomplishment. And if he failed, okay, well, I was on the way down anyway. I mean, let's go over to Italy and manage Roma. Whereas with Antonio Conte, with Antonio Conte, as I said, just winning the league with Inter Milan, he is right at the peak. He doesn't have to take this risk. Like Romano said today, he could take a year out. He could take a sabbatical. He said, calmly choose his next job. Pick one that suits him and that he can almost guarantee success with. He doesn't have to take this risk, but he is willing to, and he will fight every way that's needed to make himself successful at the club, because he could ruin what is an incredible career. Sorry.
I was just going to say it comes unstuck for everybody at some point, doesn't it? No one is. There are very few managers that are successful all the way through their career. I mean, Franco raises an interesting point with Conte. So says Luis, Alonso, and Conte were all the signings he needed to win the league with Chelsea. So he literally didn't sign many players at all when he was at Chelsea in that team that won the league. Obviously he probably inherited maybe the nucleus of, you would say, a better side than he would be inheriting here, but then I don't know if that's fair, because their season before, I mean, they finished outside of all the European places the season Conte took over, so there are similarities. I suppose the question is, do you think we're that far away from a title winning side? Because I know it's easy to get wrapped up in the sort of form of this season and the fact we've been terrible. But these are not all terrible players. We need, for my money, we need a few ins and a few outs. I'm not talking that many ins, but we do need to shift some deadwood, absolutely. But I think we need maybe 4 or 5 first team choices, not like 10. I suppose that's the point I'm making. But it's a different scenario, isn't it, Matt? You know, Conte taking over here to where he was at Chelsea.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on that point about the transfers, first of all, because it's something I've said on my own channel, and I've been slated for it. There are some terrible players in our team. That is a fact. But I don't think we are that far away from being a top team, because there's so many players in our team that are underperforming. Yeah. You know, Sergio Reguilon showed at the beginning of the season just how good he is. He's had a poor end to the season after his injury and all that. He can be better. Ndombele, Lo Celso, even Lucas, potentially Matt Doherty, could be better players. So I think that the standard of football we're seeing this year is not entirely indicative of the quality that we have in our squad. I do think we just need to fine-tune some things. We need a couple of centre-backs. We need potentially a goalkeeper, depending on what's happening with Lloris, and maybe another central midfielder to just even challenge the players that are in there already, and keeping together that front line, including Gareth Bale, I think is very important for me. But you're absolutely spot on. Conte at Spurs is very different to Conte at Chelsea. Again, it was an underachieving team, but so much money had been invested in that squad before he got there that the 3 signings that are there, yes, he didn't spend a lot of money, but he had inherited a fantastic squad, a squad that a lot of money had already been invested in. Now, in the years after that, Chelsea squad, and he still couldn't get them to that level. But the only similarity I'd really say between the two teams is he's taken over Jose Mourinho's mess. It's something he's done before. Maybe doing that again could be something for him. But very, very different situations.
I like this comment as well, Franco. I mean, Franco, we miss you, mate. I mean, I've not had you on the Cheese Room YouTube channel for a little while. I'd imagine 20 million a season will make Conte feel okay about not winning anything, and he can just blame Levy, and most Spurs fans would probably believe him. Oh, that's fighting talk, isn't it? I tell you,
I believe him.
You'd believe him, would you, Matt? You'd believe him.
I would.
I think some people are very quick to blame Levy. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I've not tried to defend him because I'm not a Levy in person per se. I'm quite pragmatic about my view, and I believe that Levy generally does try and do what's right for Spurs, which is where we can have the little ENIC out chat, if you like. My disappointment is I don't think enough people see Levy for trying to do the right thing for Tottenham. I think he always tries to do the right thing for Tottenham. I think he can be quite misunderstood. The thought that he's lining his own pockets, I don't buy into that, because he's not taking shitloads of dividends out of the club or anything. And I get he'll make money when they sell the club. I get that. But in the meantime, while he's at the club, it's in his interest to make that team as successful as he possibly can. And that doesn't mean that he's going to run it into the ground or sell Harry Kane or, not give a shit about winning anything. It's in his interest to win stuff. That enhances the value of the club. That enhances the product that is Tottenham Hotspur. And this is the bit where I think some fans just miss it, that there's more to it. There is much more to it than simply saying Daniel Levy's got no ambition, because he's clearly got ambition. He just hired Jose Mourinho and binned him off a 15 million contract, the second highest paid contract in the league. He's trying to sign Conte. He's done all these things. I don't believe it's a lack of ambition that drives it. I think it's genuine budgetary constraints. And I think the problem I have with the ENIC out posse, if I'm allowed to say that, is that, and I know there is a lot of very vocal people right now and that will probably be shouting at me watching their TV. The problem I have is there's not. I don't see it as sound logic. I just don't see it, because number one, you're going to sell him with, you're just hoping that a billionaire with $2.5 billion is going to walk in, buy the club. Probably not going to happen. Secondly, I think get mad at Joe Lewis, not Daniel Levy, because he's the guy who really controls the purse strings at Spurs. But to accuse Levy of not having ambition, why would he be trying to sign Conte Why did he appoint Mourinho as the second highest paid manager in the league and then pretty much give him what he wanted in the transfer window? Why all these things if Levy's not got the best interests of the club at heart? Over to you, Matt.
Look, I suppose a few things to pick apart there, and not pick apart, but kind of respond to. It is in his best interest to make the club successful or make the team successful, but it could also be in his best interest to make it a lucrative business. And I'm not saying that is what he's doing. Just even it's just to play devil's advocate, this team being lucrative and being a fantastic business model for him could be better than the team being successful. And look, I don't know if I'd entirely...
How?
Because at the end of the day, it's a business for him. It is a business for him. It's a business for Joe Lewis in the same way that it's a business for the Cronkies at Arsenal and for the Glazers at Manchester United. And if it was absolutely down to wanting to win trophies and to be successful and to make this team the best it can be, we wouldn't have gone into the European Super League. Because going into that European Super League, out of 12 teams, we're probably the 11th best there, ahead of Arsenal. So I think there is that element of him actually being a Spurs fan and wanting to see us win things, but it may not be as important as making that money and getting that from the club. I think with the appointment of Jose Mourinho, look, we know he absolutely loves Jose. There was an element of ambition to that, but it maybe just came a bit too late. Like you said, Jose was a serial winner. He didn't do it at Spurs. He was on the decline. He wasn't as good as he had been in the past. He did it perhaps when it was financially a bit easier. And yes, look, he was one of the highest paid managers in the league. But if he'd done that deal 5-6 years earlier, it would have taken a lot more money to convince Jose Mourinho to come to Spurs. And look, I've said it quite a bit, especially in the last week with all this Pochettino and Conte debacle going on, that Daniel Levy at times is his own worst enemy. Because 3 weeks ago, say for example, 3 weeks ago, if you told me Spurs have just announced Erik ten Hag as their new manager, I wouldn't have been over the moon. I wouldn't have been completely overjoyed, but I would have been happy, and I would have been excited to see what Ten Hag could bring to the club. But if you said that to me now, that Ten Hag is the next manager, there is a massive element of disappointment in that, because I was so excited and so almost promised Pochettino and Conte. Maybe not from Levy, maybe from what was being said within journalists,
from the media.
But at the end of the day, who's the media getting their information from? And I'm talking like the top dogs and Alistair Gold and Fabrizio Romano and all that. So when you're being promised something so fantastic and something right up there at the top, and then you're getting what you would have taken in the first place, there is that element of disappointment. And that would go back to the summer we got Lo Celso. We were maybe getting Dybala, maybe getting Fernandes, maybe getting Coutinho. Then all of a sudden you get Lo Celso, who, when you look at it, was a very good signing at the time. Maybe not for the money that we spent, but was a very good player to bring in. That deal is a little bit more disappointing because of what could have been. And that's where I feel Levy is his own worst enemy. And I put it in the way of, he is ambitious, but maybe at times he's not willing to put the money to get with that. He wants the same names. He wants the names and the quality and the pedigree to compete with the likes of Man City and Liverpool. But he doesn't want to put the same finances towards it to get on that level. And I've kind of described it.
Do we have the finances though to put towards it? You know, just
past this.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt, but you know, we are in a different ball game, aren't we? I mean, we just don't have the financial resources that Man City and Chelsea have got. Man United are wrapped up in debt, but their revenues tells you they can support more wages than we can for a start. And generally speaking, if you look at wage bills, they win trophies, right? Not big transfer signings. You know, the best players, high wages equals trophies, generally speaking. We're just not... The way it seems to me, and this is my frustration, and maybe I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but a lot of the sort of in it out people who feel very strongly about that, and I'm not knocking that, by the way, because Enid have got a lot of problems. So I'm not saying they're good owners, and I'm not saying I want them to stay. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. That would be misrepresenting my views. But what I would say is a lot of these people sort of live in this dream world utopia where an Arab or something is going to come along, buy the club, which is, by the way, something we've slagged off for years for Man City and Chelsea doing, and then pummeling billions into the team. Yeah. But do we want that, number one? Do we want that kind of owner? And secondly, we're not shopping at that table, are we? We are a league. We're several levels below that. So we're probably, what, in terms of revenue, the fourth or fifth biggest team in the Premier League, and that's more or less where we sort of punch about, isn't it? So what I'd say is, unless we get taken over by an oil sheikh or a country, Qatar or something. If they ever lose interest in PSG, that's a choice of winning things, isn't it? So do you not think that maybe the expectations are slightly unrealistic?
I think the expectations of being like up on their level in terms of competing every single season and becoming united with their 20 titles or whatever, I think that expectation is probably a bit misled. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and to get the best out of a business, you need to invest and you need to put money into it. And Joe Lewis, look, I do agree with you. I don't only blame Daniel Levy. There's a lot of people to blame in whatever situation we have. Joe Lewis is worth almost $5 billion. He has the potential to put money into the club to a degree that we can get more in return. Yeah. Now, what I would argue is he's doing that the easy way. He's building a stadium that we can absolutely guarantee we're going to get concerts, we're going to get Lady Gaga over, we're going to get the NFL there, we're going to get ticket revenue from Spurs games. That is absolutely guaranteed revenue, but it has a cap. Whereas if you spend that money on players, the sky could be the limit. If you get a Paratici and if you get a Pochettino in and you bring in the players that your scouting network or whatever figure out, they could bring us to any level. They could bring us to be the top team in England for a couple of years. Like it's not guaranteed, and it could take a lot of attempts to get that right, but it is a possibility. And that is where I feel the frustration are coming from, because I fully believe if we had stayed at White Hart Lane for one more year, just one more year, we would have lifted that Premier League crown in 2016-17. Or in 2017-18, whatever the first year at Wembley was, because that money that we put into the stadium, which led to 18 months of no investment in that squad, could have completely transformed what we had. Because we were incredible in that 2016-17 season. We finished with 86 points. We scored the most goals in the league. We conceded the least goals in the league. We were playing incredible football. Won 17 out of our 19 league games at White Hart Lane. We were winning games 4 or 5-0 at home for fun. Yeah. And then when you go that first window without investment, you're like, okay, look, that's fine. Maybe we didn't need players. When you go that second window and you go that third window, and all of a sudden that entire squad is stale. So I think Spurs sacrificed the best squad we have had in decades, the best manager we have had in decades, and the best hopes we have had in decades to make that move to the stadium. And that, I suppose, isn't on Levy. It isn't a direct criticism of them, but it's maybe just goes to show with the money that they have what could have been achieved if they went about it another way. And you can talk about ambition. We can argue that all day long, but if a manager has ambition, if Jose Mourinho comes in and he has ambition and he goes and he gets all these young players and thinks, yeah, they're fantastic players for the future, let's get them in and build them up. If Jose has that ambition, makes these very important decisions and it doesn't work, he's sacked. If a scout comes in, if a Steve Hitchen comes in and identifies all these players, it's ambitious signings, we're spending a lot of money, we're putting a big risk into it. If that doesn't work, Hitchen is sacked. So why, when Daniel Levy makes mistake after mistake after mistake in terms of not investing in the squad, sacking Pochettino, which he's admitted is a mistake, going into the European Super League, which is one of the biggest mistakes he's made, why after those consistent mistakes isn't he sacked?
Because he can't sack himself.
Joe Lewis could do it.
Joe Lewis could do it, but Joe Lewis
could do it.
He's a silent partner in Spurs, isn't he? I mean, in reality, Joe Lewis doesn't really have that much interest from what I can see in Tottenham Hotspur. And I think, obviously, that is a big frustration for all the supporters because, ultimately, you're right, he's worth like 4 or 5 billion, but he's more interested in collecting art than he is trophies. That's an absolute fact. By the same token, the businessman side of me says, well, it's his business and he can do what he likes with it, and it's up to him if he invests in it or not. So I totally see it from both perspectives, and I see it from the comment Daniel's dropped in here as well. I think we need to look at the mess we're in. Pre-ENIC, we finished regularly bottom half of. I'm assuming he's going to say in the league, and he sort of got drunk and stopped typing.
That's what Levy does to people. Come on.
I think Levy gets a very bad rep, but doesn't do himself any favours. I think that's fair to say. And I want to pick up on this comment that Mark's also said. It's been frustrating to see deals which would have been great for us when the extra couple of million could have really transformed the club. Grealish, Bruno, Diaz, etc. So, I mean, in terms of what I would say is hindsight's wonderful, because Grealish, at the time, a lot of the people who were very vocal about how the club is run were saying Grealish is not a sign of ambition or intent. He's just going to sit on the bench. He won't even make the bench. He's not good enough for the bench. Why are we wasting our time trying to scratching around in the bargain basement trying to sign Jack Grealish? Of course, literally no one will admit to that now. But the good thing is with social media, you've got long timelines that go back. So that's Grealish. Bruno Fernandes, fair point. We were after him. We scouted him. We had conversations with him. I think we nearly signed him. For whatever reason, we chose Lo Celso and Ndombele as players over him. And again, hindsight is nice, but I mean, I think part of the problem for Levy, if I'm, and again, I'm not defending him, playing devil's advocate. Every time he seems to spend significant sum of money on a player, they end up being shit, don't they? I mean, you look at Ndombele, and he's just nowhere near fulfilled his potential whatsoever under two different managers. And you look at Lo Celso, and he's bang average. And you look at Sanchez, and he's probably the worst of our centre-backs. And
incompetent, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Well, he's fast. I mean, that's what he's good at. He's a speed demon, but apart from that, he's terrible.
He's an athlete, not a footballer, is what I say.
And then you look, but they can be moulded into footballers. Look at Kyle Walker, because he was a terrible footballer and he's moulded.
That is true.
You look at people like Soldado, who we spent, I think it was a club record at the time, and he was a complete flop. You look at Bentley, flop. You go back and look at all these players. Basically, any time Levy has gone out there, balls out, and spent a significant amount of money, they've ended up shit. So, or really under delivering. Can you name me one high-profile signing? The last people I can remember being good high-profile signings. If you're watching us tonight, drop it in the comment box. Who's the last big money signing we've had that's actually turned out well for us? I mean, Gaza and Gascoigne were probably the last two for me. Maybe that's the reason, Matt. Maybe that's the reason why he's a bit pound note shy, because number one, you don't get a return on investment on those players, which obviously he'll be looking at. But secondly, they've not really enhanced the team, have they?
Yeah, I'm racking my brain here trying to think of the last big player we signed.
It's a good question. I'm going to tweet that, actually. I'm going to tweet that. When was the last club record signing that actually represented good value? I'm waiting for the people watching this stream to sort of come up with some ideas there, because I can't bloody think of any.
I'm hoping Ndombele becomes that. I'm a big fan of Ndombele, and I think the potential that is there can't be denied. But it's about getting that out of him.
And just to Lamella.
Oh, Franco, you're better than that. Come on.
Lamella, yeah, but he was club record, wasn't he? Wasn't he like 30 mil?
He was something big. Yeah, God, the expectations were massive when he came in. But just to go back to that point that I was in that comment there about the likes of Jack Grealish and that, and I do agree with you. Fans, I think, do forget what they've said very quickly, and I'm sure I'm guilty of that. I mean, I'm sure every fan is at some stage guilty of that. But
not me, Matt. I never forget.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take your word for it. We as fans can say whatever the hell we want in terms of, well, let's not get Grealish, he's not a good signing right now. Or the big one for me is last summer, like I work in a footballing environment, so it's all we ever talk about. Last summer we signed Doherty, we signed Reguilon, we signed Højbjerg, Bale, all these signings, and I said it's a fantastic window. And I think every Spurs fan is the same, or that's for Spurs or whatever. It is one that has the potential to be a very, very important one for us going forward. And I said it's a brilliant window, fantastic. We've one of the best squads in the league in terms of depth and all that. I was very wrong on that. But people were saying to me, well, I can't give out about Levy and I can't give out about Jose Mourinho now because I thought at the time that it was good. And my response to that was, I'm not getting paid millions and millions and millions of pounds a year to be right about these things. I'm not responsible for that decision. I can have my opinion, and if I'm wrong, fair enough. I'll hold my hands up. I'm wrong. I was very wrong about that window, and I was even more wrong about that squad. But it's not my job to be right about it. It's my hobby to be right about it. And I do take pride in my footballing knowledge when I am right, which is very rare at this stage. But it's Jose and Levy who are being absolutely held responsible and are being paid to be right about it. So if they're not, maybe they should be held responsible. And I saw a quote, I think it was Brian Clough, who said it way back when, that if a chairman brings in a manager and that manager fails, the manager gets sacked, maybe the chairman should leave too. I don't agree to it to that extent. Or it has to be held responsible for the wrongdoings, for the failings all throughout the club, more than perhaps they are.
And maybe that brings us back round to where the reason why we've got a director of football in there, because at least then there's accountability. But the accountability currently for recruitment is Hitchen, isn't it? Hitchen basically heads up player recruitment now. There's a lot of hatred for Steve Hitchen right now. If you go on Twitter and search Hitchen, you'll see all sorts of bad stuff. I mean, I'm talking bad shit. Is Hitchen to blame, Matt, for our poor recruitment?
Yes and no. I would say yes. Or first of all, I'd say no in terms of he's being charged with the recruitment and finding the players that we want, but it's under very, very strict limitations and very tight restrictions in terms of the finances and a lot of the time the demographic of player he's looking for. So under those tough circumstances, it'll be a difficult job for anybody. But on the flip side, you can't judge him on what he is capable of. You have to judge him on what he and how he works within those environments. So if he could be the man, if you give him £250 million every window, he could go out and he could find the next Mbappe and he could bring him in. He could find the next Neymar. He could find all these incredible players, but that's not what he's going to get to do with Spurs. So I bring the example: Pep Guardiola, best manager in world football for me right now. Put him at Burnley and he's useless. But as a Burnley fan, you need to judge him on what he could achieve at Burnley. So that is where I would give a lot of leeway to Hitchen. Very strict restrictions and all that. But it's what he needs to be good at. Look at Leicester and their recruitment over the last couple of years. James Justin, £8 million. Timothy Castagna, very, very cheap. Maddison found him in the Championship. Vardy got him from the Conference. Kelechi Iheanacho, a failing player at Manchester City. Wilfred Ndidi, N'Golo Kante, Riyad Mahrez. The list goes on. It is endless at Leicester. If they can find those players for cheap, and they can make that into a team that challenges for Champions League football 2 seasons in a row, obviously with their failings coming with that, why can't Spurs be the team to do that? Why can't we find those players who are that cheap and can be that successful? If Hitchen can't, as much as he may be better in a different environment, he's not good enough in this environment. So maybe then a replacement does need to be found. But I do feel he is scapegoated quite a bit.
I suppose, though, going back to my point, that's where you then get supporters really getting on the club's back in terms of, you just signed Jamie Vardy from the Conference. Why the have you done that? You know, and that's where I guess we need to cut people a little bit more slack, right?
I would argue, look, again, I don't mean to argue every single point that you have, but even if it's just offer a different viewpoint or play devil's advocate, if Levy had shown in the past, or if Hitchen had shown in the past that those obscure signings that he makes work, well, let me trust him when he does it. In the same way that, look at Liverpool, they sold Philip Coutinho for 132 million a few years back. Could have been detrimental to their efforts in the Premier League this decade, but by the end of it, they'd won the Premier League because of how they reinvested that in Virgil van Dijk and Alisson. Spurs had a similar chance with Gareth Bale, admittedly in a very different situation as a club than what we are now. So Levy failed in that. That's why if we sell Harry Kane, it could be the end for Spurs, because we don't trust the board to put it back in. And I'd even bring it even further and go, we're behind in that regard with Aston Villa. Because I didn't expect Villa to sell Grealish this summer, but now seeing them pick up Buendia for 35 million and now going and looking for James Ward-Prowse, they're preemptively spending that Jack Grealish money. So in one point, if they sell Jack Grealish and then go for Buendia, all of a sudden that 35 million is 45 million and the 40 for Ward-Prowse is 50. But even going further than that, they don't need a replacement when Grealish is gone because they already have it. They aren't going to be rushing towards the end of the window like Spurs always do in trying to get their replacements for players that we quite often don't end up getting. So it's the failures of them in the past that lead to that lack of trust in their capabilities.
Yeah, but then in the last transfer window last summer, we weren't scratching around last minute, were we? As you've already said, you know, we were all saying, 10 out of 10, Levy's pulled it out of the bag. It's a great transfer window. I mean, how wrong we were, maybe, or how badly coached the players were over the last 18 months, 12 months, I should say. Maybe we just need to have a little faith and hope that it goes well this transfer window. The one thing I can say is I'm really glad we've got a director of football in, because it means I can stop blaming Levy for every transfer, surely.
It gives us another scapegoat. He's going to be working with Hitchen, so we can bounce between the two when something goes wrong. Try and decide who's in the wrong.
Well, Phil Ambrose, imagine if we signed Johnny Evans last summer. And this is what I mean, you know, the supporters have got to stop getting on the back of the club, get behind the club and support the decisions that we take. If we'd have signed Johnny Evans, we'd have got mullered for that. Mullered. There would be people calling for Hitchen's head, dangling him off the skywalk in one of those medieval cages, like with a cockerel picking at him. I'm telling you now, it would have been carnage if we'd have signed Johnny Evans. as it turns out, he's the linchpins of Leicester's blooming top 4 challenge, which, by the way, faded away again. Must add that in there.
It did.
So I just think we have to be a little bit more considered when we comment on the players that we're signing. I mean, I was really excited when we signed Eric Lamela all those years ago.
As was I. Don't worry about it. I think we all were.
So we've got an answer on the expensive signing, by the way, Matt. TJ, Son, 22 million. HG is right. Son is the most expensive, decent signing. So Son. So, I suppose 22 million was a lot. It wasn't a club record, though, was it? So I suppose my question should have been better phrased. When was the last club record signing that worked out well? Go find that out for me, and I'll be able to.
Jimmy Greaves.
Greavesy. Yeah, we might have to go back that far. I'm sure it'd be Lineker or Gaza. I'm absolutely sure. But I know I know the cheeseheads will be watching this, and they're quite a bright bunch, and very bright bunch in some cases, I should say. No offence. They will absolutely be racking their brains now, saying, "Right, club signings, who are the best ones?"
I'd be interested to see the answers that come in on that.
Well, they're flying in now. I mean, that none relevant to that. But we've got Jerome Boateng on a free transfer. He'd be a cracker, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he's. Look, I said it about Bale and Hart and Jose last summer, but maybe he could be. Or was that last summer? Yeah, it was last summer. God, all my years have been mixed up. A winner, proven winner. He knows what it takes, and someone who maybe could coach a bit of sense. Hear me out. Into Eric Dyer.
No,
now, I don't think it's possible. But if anyone could, it might be Jerome Boateng. Not Sanchez. Sanchez is the last cause.
I think Sanchez has got more about him than Dyer.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, because Dyer's not good at anything. Sanchez at least can run fast.
That's fair. I'm sure Dyer won a few headers at the start of the season, though.
Dyer's got the haircut to win a few headers. It's like a lawnmower's just gone over it. He looks like a brute, doesn't he? And then you see him play and you think, Jesus, he is clueless. I think Dyer's got a great brain, in fairness. That's what he's got going for him. Really good brain. Really intelligent bloke, apart from when he's storming the grandstand, which I still haven't thought about. But he's an intelligent footballing brain in someone with a real lack of ability. We should have taken. I remember when he was being touted 50 million to Man United. That's how good Poch got him playing at one stage,
Yeah, him and that in the double pivot with Dembele dropping in between the centre halves. That's the Spurs I want back. That's the Spurs when you knew every single week what we were going to play, who was going to play it.
That's the Spurs we all want back, mate. I think no one watching this broadcast would disagree with that whatsoever. Johnny Evans, 3 million was always a bargain. HG, how you doing, HG? Just a shame his name wasn't Johnny O. Evansio. Craig Dawson didn't do too badly for the Spammers on a free transfer. Imagine if we'd rolled him out. Yep, there's definitely a point.
Remember last summer we were being linked with Dele Alli. Imagine we got linked on loan. In hindsight, would have been a very, very decent deal. But I remember when we were being linked with him, I was on a stream absolutely screaming at the camera with We Are Tottenham TV saying, like, this can't happen. We can't do this to our club. In hindsight, he could have been Lingard, yeah. In hindsight, he could have been the difference in our season.
Yeah, he could have been good, but we'd have ruined him. Don't worry about that. Phil Ambrose, I would say none of those Leicester signings are better than ours. The key difference is they are a team and we currently aren't. I think there is a lot in that. And we've touched on it already, haven't we, Matt, about I think we'd both agree the team is really badly coached for the last 12 months, despite Jose being a very accomplished manager, not a great coach. HG, this is an offer for the most expensive one. Modric, probably.
Ooh,
I didn't know he was club record, Modric. Was he club record? Someone look that
I don't know, but do you ever hear the story about Daniel Levy and the jerseys when we signed Luka Modric?
No, go for it.
He so when he signed Levy from Zagreb, I forget how much it was. Was it 30 million? No, it wouldn't have been that much, but however much it was when we were in negotiations with Zagreb and everything's kind of agreed upon. The Zagreb chairman, whoever it was, said to Levy, "Can we just get, as a sign of goodwill, can we just get 5 Tottenham jerseys with Modric name and number on the back, just as a memento for ourselves? They're a team who pride themselves in the players they bring to the youth academy." So Levy's like, "Yeah, that's no problem. We'll get that done." A couple of days later, Dinamo Zagreb get the invoice or whatever and they see the price tag for Madrid that they'd agreed upon minus the cost of 5 jerseys, which Levy actually charged them for.
Well, I'm interested in this, so I'm looking at it now. So the most expensive Spurs signings, Tongi on the Ballet, 55 is listed at 55 million. Sanchez, 42 million. 42 million. And we're talking about 3 million for Conte. Right, the next wonderful player on the list is Musa Sissoko, 30 million. And then we've got Bergwijn, believe it or not, Soldado, Eric Lamela, then Ryan Sessegnon, then Lucas Moura, and then Serge Aurier. When I go back and look at how much he costs, God, it's that far back. I can't be asked to look it up. There we go. This is a great shout. Les Ferdinand, our best record signing.
Can't argue that.
Shauna, Dyer has better defensive stats than Diaz. I don't believe you. Prove it.
I trust Shauna. Shauna's an absolute hero.
Prove it, Shauna. Prove it. The players that left us all went to win big. Yeah, and this is the point. The players that left us all went to win big. Those who joined underachieved for whatever reason. It's absolutely true. Sweet cockerel. Eric Dyer is like a fan who's won a competition to play for Spurs. He has heart, desire, but just doesn't have the body or the skill. And Chris says that's the best description of Dyer I've ever seen. Franco rightly saying Modric wasn't a record signing. So, yep, Darren Bent was more expensive, and look how he turned out. Darren Bent.
What a player there. I'll never forget the first Spurs game I was at. We drew Portsmouth in 2008, I think it was. Last minute, Darren Bent missed an open goal. I'll never forget it. I'll never forgive him for it either. It's entirely his fault. Ruined the trip. I was devastated.
So, this whole thing is just... I'm looking back and I'm looking back and I'm looking back and I can't... I think Jermaine Defoe, 7 million at the time, might have been a record signing. He turned out well. No, he wasn't a record signing. Here we go. Classic example. Because Dean Richards, God love him, was 8.1 million prior to that. And Sergei Rebrov, who can forget him, 11 million. He turned out crap.
He's in the high up in the odds for the managers at the moment.
Is he really?
Or at least he was a few days ago, yeah. He's what
doing these days, is it? Les Ferdinand, 6 million.
I say high up, he was in like...
Yeah, it's just whenever. Here we go. Gaza, 2 million quid we paid for Gaza to Newcastle. So, and Lineker we paid 1.2 million. That was back in the day. Good and Jury, 2 million. That was back in the days when men were men. It just really, honestly, it. Don't spend money, Spurs. That's what we've decided. That's what I've just brought through. Just do not spend money.
I would like to distance myself from this conclusion. I do not agree.
All right, I'll rephrase. Don't spend money on crap. Go for someone that can't fail, has proven it at every level. It'd be great. Rebrov was £11. I think you mean £11 million in the 90s.
£11 it wouldn't have been worth it.
Yeah, but 11 million in 90s money. That's like a 40 million. That's like £40 million transfer now, surely.
Yeah.
Klinsmann. What do we pay for Klinsmann? 2 million quid, apparently.
What do you think about him potentially being saying he's been contacted by Levy as the next manager?
Yeah, so I've seen Klinsmann's been named. I'm not really a fan of any of his work so far as a manager. I like him as a person, as a pundit. He seems quite guy switched on, and as a player, I don't know if it's before your time or what, Matt, but the guy was just phenomenal for Spurs, especially in the first spell. He was amazing. He was just a breath of fresh air, and that spell only lasted like a year, but he was incredible. I would really like Jurgen back at the club in some capacity. Maybe as a returning legend who can give you a chat in the executive lounge at halftime about how things were back then. But I don't want to see him in the management dugout particularly. What's your view?
Look, like I said, he is before my time. I never had the honour of seeing him play for Spurs. I've seen highlights and all that, and I know the quality of player that he was, and maybe that's taken the heart out of my opinion of him. But he hasn't been a good manager wherever he's been, and he maybe did a decent job with the USA, but with Germany, with Bayern Munich, and with Hertha Berlin recently, especially, it's just not worked out for him. And we maybe pick which managers we want based on their footballing philosophies and the way they play and all that. I couldn't tell you a thing about how Klinsmann wants to play football, what type of players he'd want to recruit. It just seems like the way I said it, and the timing of Klinsmann coming out and saying this is very interesting. It just feels to me like a safety net manager for Daniel Levy, with what he apparently said to Klinsmann in, let's see how things go. A few things to clarify, and maybe further down the line. If Spurs are serious about getting a manager before the Euros, if Conte doesn't happen, if Ten Hag falls apart, maybe we'll just go back to Klinsmann to appoint a manager for the sake of appointing a manager, and that terrifies me more than anything.
I don't think Klinsmann will be the manager of the club. I just don't think. He's not been closely linked. He's not made any shortlist whatsoever. He's just done a TV interview and gone, you know what? If they offer me the job, I love Spurs. I'd love to do the job. Daniel knows I've always had a good relationship with Daniel. He can pick up the phone to me anytime. Well, that's like me saying the same. Quite frankly, Daniel, if you want to reach out to me, I'll give it a go. Me and Matt double act. Absolutely. No problem at all. Although, actually, that's cheating on HG. I've already offered him the job. I'm sorry, Matt.
No, getting my hopes up like that isn't okay.
You could be the DOF or something, yeah.
Doing it.
K. Alexander, got to be better options out there. Jurgen, great player, cheered up the miserable 90s. And it was miserable. Really miserable after we won the FA Cup, though. That was good. And I love this one. Sol Campbell is 100 to 1.
Joe Steve Hitchen is in there.
No, he's not.
Steve Hitchen with Sky Bet is 66 to 1 to be the next Spurs manager.
What's Daniel Levy? What odds do you get on Daniel?
He's not there just yet.
I tell you what, he should be.
If anyone was going to do it. The manager with the widest odds are with Paddy Power and Betfair. For 400 to 1, you can get Neil Warnock.
400 to 1?
400 to 1.
What about Big Sam? Where's he at? He's got to be in there somewhere.
He's 80 to 1 with Sky Bet.
80 to 1? That's quite short, actually. That's shorter than would have been.
It's concerning.
And Sweaty Cockerel, we do like your interaction. He's all over it, this guy. I've been lucky enough to see Gaza, Klinsmann and Ginola, not to mention 2 trophies. I feel spoilt compared to Matt.
Do you know an interesting fact?
Go for it.
People always ask, did I support Spurs the last time we won a trophy? And I've recently done the work and I've realised I started supporting Spurs 6 days after we won the Carling Cup in 2008. So maybe it's my fault this entire drought, but I've never seen Spurs win a trophy.
You are the jinx, Matt. You are the jinx. Well, look, we've been going in about an hour. Is beyond my bedtime. Here we go. Touch on this one very quickly before we go. Great. Isn't Zidane available? We don't want Zidane anywhere near Spurs, do we?
When a manager leaves a club after winning 4 Champions Leagues and says maybe they'd be better off without me, I think that tells you all you need to know. I think we need to steer very, very much clear of Zinedine Zidane. What
about Tim Sherwood?
Did we say Allardyce was 88 to 1? Should we give him a go? Well, look, the manager with the best win percentage of Tottenham's Premier League history,
is absolutely. Although Ryan Mason surely won't be far off that.
With the finish of the season he had,
finished with a flourish. Look, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight, Matt. All of you at home, and Matt, thanks very much for joining me, coming over from your channel. It's been a real pleasure. Hope we can have you back on soon, and maybe, you never know, maybe you'll have me on your show.
I will, as soon as our times align, because it seems whenever we try and get to do something, there's always something on. And it's not a case of, I'm washing my hair. It's actually genuine clashes in the calendar. But look,
likewise,
thanks a million for having me on.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks a million for having me on. I've really enjoyed the discussion.
Dyeing my hair, though, Matt. Dyeing my hair,
Dyeing, okay, I understand.
But, thanks for it. And come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.